Mona Bahraini.
There's so many familiar faces. I have not used a mic before to speak to a crowd, so bear with me if I have moments that I'm awkward. I'm going to try really hard not to drop it because I'm very animated. I'm assuming most of you here have heard of my business and heard a little bit about me, maybe through social media, but I wanted to take this time today to share my journey and how I got here. And it really all started from my upbringing in Arizona. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, hence the cactus obsession that came out later in life. But I grew up in Arizona, and I came out to Northern California about 8 or 9 years ago. And so I was in my late 20s, and it was really funny that I even ended up in California because I had all my friends, my family, everyone was in Arizona, and I was very rooted there. And I had actually gone through a really bad breakup in my late 20s, and my mom suggested that I take a trip and go into nature and find something therapeutic, doing something outside. And a little backstory about my mother. She is the OG Earth Muffin. I call myself an Earth Muffin, but she legitimately lives for the outdoors. And so much of our childhood, we were traveling around, going to different national parks, and she always just engraved in us how therapeutic nature truly is. And so I think that, those feelings came out a lot as I became older and became more grounded with who I was. And so I took this trip out to South Lake Tahoe, like most of you have and are familiar with. And I don't know if any of you have seen that movie. It's called Out Cold with Zach Effanilakis. What's his last name? Does anyone say his name? Can anyone say his name? I can't. But it's a really funny snowboarding movie. And I, growing up in the desert, had no idea that that was real life and that was a culture out in Tahoe. So I go out to Tahoe during the winter season, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, look at all these Tabros, like look at all this fun time that they're having out in the snow. So it was just a totally different world for me. And so I ended up becoming friends with quite a few locals and visiting quite a few times. And then I came one time to Tahoe in the summer. And if you've gone in the summertime to Tahoe, it's the most magical experience. And so I was sold, and I thought, okay, I gotta find a job out here. And I was actually a practicing dental hygienist. I had been a hygienist for about 9 years, and oral hygiene was my jam. Like, I was all about teeth. Let's keep them clean. Let's keep them healthy. It's a gateway to your soul. So it was just my thing. So I found a dental office that was hiring in South Lake Tahoe, and I took the job, and that's really what brought me out here. I don't think I would have even ended up out here if I wasn't encouraged to take that trip. And after that trip, I remember calling my sister and being like, I'm thinking about leaving Arizona and going to Tahoe. And she was like, yeah, get the heck out of Arizona. Go to California. Go do something else, And so it was just that encouragement from my family that was really helpful. And it kept me rooted in like my belief system in that space and in that time in my life. So that's how I ended up here. And after a couple of years, or in Northern California, after a couple of years, I decided that the guys out in Tahoe weren't going to cut it. So I thought I probably need to get back to a real city and find some more goal-oriented people that I could associate myself with, if anyone can relate to that, and not be intimidated by a hardworking, strong woman. And so I came out to Sacramento because my boss had a dental office here. So I came out here, and that's really when I truly fell in love with Sacramento during that time, because I actually met my boyfriend, who is now my husband, and I realized that Sacramento is this gem of a city. When you don't live here, honestly, most people call it the armpit of California. There's one person in here that has called it that, and I was like, well, I had no idea. I didn't have any expectations. And so when I saw the city and I was exposed to it, it was incredible. And it was almost like I like to describe Sacramento as it's still kind of at the end of college. It's still trying it's still trying to figure itself out and identify who it is. And it's so cool to be in this position and growing with Sacramento for those who have grown up here. And I know some of you that, you know, have watched Sacramento grow and evolve. And it's so cool to be in a space where it's like graduating college and being like, this is me. I'm entering the world and showing who it is and where it wants to be rooted. So that's how I ended up in Sacramento, as just an explanation why this desert person came out here to California. And I, during this time, have always loved being outdoors, you know, and being outside and getting outside. And I found the most beauty and fulfillment being surrounded by nature, and the most inspiration, because Mama Earth provides everything for us, literally keeps us breathing, keeps us alive. And so it's so important that we respect her and give her back the respect that she deserves, truly. So, you know, that has always been something that's engraved with me and engraved in me. And so I had started collecting succulents and cactuses about, I want to say, like, it's been maybe 5 to 7 years ago. I've always loved plants. My mom's entire house is covered in plants. So, you know, it started coming out, and I started buying plants and decorating, and I got my first bowl of succulents from Costco, of all places. And I remember just seeing these succulents and thinking, oh my gosh, I've never really seen plants like this before. I'm so exposed to cactuses and different varieties of cacti, but never seen succulents. And they truly reminded me of that movie Avatar, where it just felt like this whimsical, magical experience in real life. And they're like underwater plants on land. And so I just felt this sense of euphoria, like whenever I saw them, I could just stare at my pot for hours, honestly, and just think of different things, and my creativity would go wild. So I really got into them, and I became a part of the Succulent and Cactus Society, which is a thing here in California. For those of you who want to sign up, it's only $10 a year, and you get a list of really cool nurseries in people's backyards all along California. And so I became a part of this club, and I would, on my days off from hygiene, would travel hours one way just to go and look at someone's garden and check out their plants and maybe buy a couple of plants. And so it was really just this huge hobby of mine, and this passion that I didn't share that much. I didn't even post anything much about it on social media. And then about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, I got in this freak accident. And this accident left me, it was just a complete curveball, you know, and much of you here have probably gone through that, where life just serves you something and you're like, what the hell am I supposed to do now? And I was told I couldn't go back to work for a year, that I may need surgery and all these things. So it was just a lot of information, and I could have really let that get to me, and there were times where it really brought me down, but I decided to channel my energy into my hobbies. And since I had that time off, I didn't want to sit around and do nothing. I wanted to be proactive in my own life, so that didn't build up and create a negative space for me from this accident. So I thought, why don't I just start, you know, taking pictures of my succulents and posting them on social media? And at that point, I remember not being super active on social media like I am now, for those of you who do keep up with my Instagram. But I felt like, okay, let me turn to social media and see what's going on in Sacramento. So I went to the Instagram and I looked up different accounts and different businesses, and I wanted to find some inspiration and figure out, what is Sacramento all about? What are the people like? What are the creatives like? And I felt like it was very difficult at that point. I just didn't find any accounts or businesses that felt like had any meaning or purpose that I could connect to. And, you know, I just felt like it was a bit bland, if that's the nicest way I could say it. And I wanted to feel inspired by someone else's work. I wanted to feel their passion. And I just didn't see that on social media. And so I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to use this tool that can often be very superficial, and we all get sucked into the superficial side of the cyber world and social media and things like that, I want to make sure that if I use this tool, it becomes an extension of who I am. and that people can feel the authenticity behind that. And so that's what I decided to do. I decided to take pictures of my succulents and cactuses, and at that point, 2.5 years ago, I had over like 200 in our little 600 square foot apartment. God only knows where I would put these things. I'd tell our neighbors, we were in an apartment complex, if I could keep some of my plants in their front patio. It was so funny. So it's really funny for them to see me now and see what's going on with the business, because now I have even more succulents and cactuses. But so I started taking pictures of them, and I thought from the beginning I wanted to have purpose. And so I called the Prickly Pear a cactus and succulent shop, but it's also a nursery with purpose. And I wanted that to encompass a lot of things. I wanted that to encompass, not only succulents and cactuses, but the planet, the earth, being mindful, being aware of our community, of the people around us, of ourselves, giving ourselves enough attention and self-care to be the best versions of ourselves. And so it really grew from that point. And from there, we were in the market to buy our first home, and we bought our first home in Oak Park. And I thought, why don't I create an actual store that people could come visit? Now, it is very expensive buying or trying to get a lease or renting a brick and mortar space. And so I thought, let me just take baby steps. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to go on during this time, mind you, I'm trying to heal from this accident and decide if I'm going to have surgery. So it was just a lot of things. So I was just trying to take cautious steps. And so I thought, why don't I build a shop in the backyard and invite people to our shop once a week and see what happens? And so I decided to make Sunday our public hours, and I opened our shop up to the public from 10 to 5. And I had made so many announcements. I told all the news stations, and I had no idea if people would show up. And the day of the grand open, hundreds of people flooded in, and they shopped at our backyard nursery. And it was so wild, and it was just that stamp of validation, that, maybe this is something that is needed in the community, and it's really a passion that I feel so strongly about that I want to share. And so from there, it just kind of kept growing. And during this time, I really wanted to share the hardship during the growth of the business. And for those of you, many of you in here are small business owners or entrepreneurs in many different avenues. And you have to work so hard to prove it to yourself that it's worth it, that you're worth it, and that you deserve it. And I think that constant reminder, keeping that relevant in your mind, is so important. But that can only be supported if you really believe in yourself and what you're doing. And that's where authenticity comes in. I tell people often to not shy away from learning your talents. If you identify your talents, because every single person in this room has incredible talents, and you nurture that talent, and then you put your purpose behind it, that is what creates authenticity. So having your talents and knowing them. And that takes a long time. Sometimes you have to go through a lot of things, many years, to figure out exactly what to zone in on, what are your talents, and then making sure that you believe in them and you put a purpose behind it, because that's what makes people connected to what you're doing, and that's what cultivates the authenticity behind the business, in my opinion and from my experience. So I definitely had those moments throughout this process where I got that validation, and one big one was when I was here and giving my 30-second pitch, and it was the day that Najina and Ian were being highlighted for being the owners of South, which is a fabulous restaurant, and Najina is an incredible entrepreneur in our community. And I was so inspired by her story. And I remember giving my 30-second pitch, and we wanted to start this event with the 30-second pitch, but we couldn't find the video. And I was so mortified speaking in front of people. I woke up 3 hours prior to that day for Creative Mornings, and I just practiced in front of the mirror because I didn't want to hold anything. I don't want to have note cards. I wanted to feel confident. And I choked so hard the first sentence, and then I remember gathering myself and being like, it's okay, finish it up, you're fine. It's okay if you go to 32 seconds. I was super nervous. And so it's so wild to be back in this exact space where I gave my 30-second pitch, and where Najina, I heard her speak, and the passion behind her work really inspired me. And now being back on this stage and speaking to all of you about my journey through this entire business and my entrepreneurship through it. So the prickly pear just kept growing, and I honestly grew with it. I always tell people you have to BS your way through it, because you really, even though you know what you want to do and you have these visions, you still have to kind of be like, yeah, I know what's up. I can do this. Like, no big deal. Why not? I can do that. You know, and even if you've never done it before, you still have to go in full force and just figure it out. And, you know, that brings me back to another movie. I love quoting movies. It's just a thing I do. But there's a movie called We Bought a Zoo, and it's with Matt Damon, who's incredibly attractive. But the movie, the purpose behind the movie is so cool because it really revolves around this phrase, why not? And that really stuck with me because I feel like, why would I say no? Why would I ever limit myself to meet my potential? And I'm for sure going to fail during that time, but I'm going to have success as well, and that's where the growth lies. And I remember, you know, having the prickly pear in our backyard, and all I did was buy a carport from Home Depot, and I put my plants around it, built a couple of tables, and then my husband put together a do-it-yourself greenhouse online in the back, and people would come visit, and then I started opening my space to Pot and Sips, which is a potting class where I provide wine and bites, and people started booking birthdays and kid parties and mom days and all these sorts of things, and it was like I was just having a party with people and like providing cool plants, and it was the most fun experience. And just cultivating that those good feelings. And outgrew that space very quickly, and I thought, okay, I need to have a brick and mortar store. That's what's gonna make me legitimate. And so I was out looking for a property. I found this 1.52 acre lot that was $1 million. I can't even remember, a little over $1 million. And I said, I can raise that money. I could totally do that. Why not? And so I launched a fundraiser, never having any experience with launching a fundraiser in my life. And it was so wild because I was so confident. I was like, I can do this. And I knew I could. I really had no doubt that I could do it. And I raised about $2,000. And I thought, okay, well, then I definitely can't do this, but that's okay. I'm not going to let that stop me. And I thought, something will continue. I'm going to manifest something. I'm going to believe in myself. I believe in my purpose. I believe in my talents. It will come through. And then probably a couple of weeks later, the woman who owned what the prickly pear is today had read an article that the Sacramento Bee had done on the prickly pear. And that article, I almost declined because I thought, who reads the newspaper anymore? You know, like, why would I do, an interview for the newspaper? But I learned such a good lesson from that, because if I said no to that, I probably would have never met this lady, because she read that article. So now, again, like, just you can't take those moments for granted. No matter where you grow or no matter where you are, when someone invites you into something or they think you should be connected somewhere, just always say yes, because you never know who you're going to gain, what you're going to gain from that situation. And so she heard about my business, unbeknownst to me, sent her best friend to my house on a Sunday during the public hours at the Prickly Pear. And this woman kind of walks in, and she's just watching me, and she's just watching my demeanor and how I interact with all the customers. And about 30 minutes later, her demeanor totally changes, and she says, "Hey, I'm here because I want you to buy my best friend's house." And I'm like, that's really weird. But, I can come look. And she's like, no, just trust me. It's going to be amazing. And so I went the next day and I looked at this property, and I was blown away. It looked nothing like it does today, but it was this sensation that I cannot even describe, which I believe all of you will go through that or have gone through that in your life, where you're like, whoa, this validation from the universe is just like taking over. And so I told my family, I told my husband, I told everyone, and I showed them the space, and they were all like, what are you thinking? This place is a disaster. Like, you're going to have to put so much money into fixing it up. And I just couldn't get past the vision. And, somehow it just worked out. We ended up buying the property. But before we officially bought the property, I wanted to know, can I turn this house into a business? Can I get it permitted? Can I get it zoned? And all that stuff. And so I went to the city, thanks to one of my dear friends, Gina, who is an amazing human in our community. And she knows one of the city managers that is in charge of design and city building and permitting. And I brought him to the property, and he brought out this huge book of codes, and he opened it up to my lot, and he showed it to me verbatim in writing. It said that all the houses in that particular area are zoned for low-grade commercial, and it said, like, farmer's market, student center, everything that the prickly pear wanted to embody and become, it was already in writing. And so it was just the most wildest feeling to get that validation of like, yes, this is it, go full force. And so then everything that I wanted to build with the prickly pear flourished and came to life in that property. And that's what it is today. And from the beginning, I've always, again, called it a nursery with purpose because it's so important to know our community and to give back to our community and really understand it. And I have often found myself feeling very confident in my feelings and then something putting me in check and being like, honey, that's not actually the reality. You got to understand the source, the roots, what the situation really is. And so I have realized that I lived in a space of privilege for a very long time until I was exposed to the Sacramento community and all the amazing humans here that advocate for the community. I get a little emotional about it because I didn't realize how much healing our community and our world needs. And it is so, so urgent and important for all of us to look in our own lives and figure out what it is our purpose is in this space, on this earthly living space, what it is that we need to do to make our planet better and to make our community better. So really bridging the gaps. And one thing big for me was I've always worked with adults with disabilities. I had a family member that had challenges that I didn't see often, but I would occasionally see this cousin at family reunions, and I felt very drawn to him. And that was from a very young age. And from that, later in life, I started volunteering with different nonprofits that work with adults with disabilities. And I think that the reason why I enjoy being around maybe that demographic of that community of people is because there's no superficial layer. And it's the most raw human experience you can ever get. And it really does keep you grounded and reminds you that everyone has challenges and to be mindful of that and figure out how to make sure that you accommodate everyone in your community. So that was like a big thing for the prickly pear too, and this property allowed it to actually come to life as well. And I built a small community garden for the nonprofits that I work with here in Sacramento, and they come about 2 to 4 times a month, and they tend to their garden, and when they have enough vegetables, we have a farmer's market where they sell their produce to my customers during our public hours. And so it's been such a beautiful experience to watch that gap, come closer and see people that I see regularly as customers come and interact with people that they may have never interacted with before. So I might have gone all over the place. Hopefully I kind of led you guys in some direction with the prickly pear. But yeah, that's really what it is. And today it's still just open to the public on Sundays from 10 to 5. And then Monday through Saturday I host private events. And they're pot and sips, or people rent it out as a venue space. And I really just, again, still use social media as a collaborative space. I want people to feel full and feel happy when they see my social media and feel like it's not a space where they feel inadequate. Often I would skim through other people's social media and feel kind of left feeling inadequate and not good enough, not pretty enough, not cool enough, not doing anything enough. And I really try to cater the opposite of that into what I share on social media. And I still touch on subjects that are very sensitive through that outlet. And often I'll find, I've shared this recently, that I lose a surge of followers on social media when I talk about something serious. And it's so interesting to me that that is such a difficult conversation and awareness to bring to someone when they see a happy account and then all of a sudden they're dropped with some purpose or something serious. They seem to be overwhelmed by that feeling. So it's very interesting to be in a space like this, and I do want it to grow and continue to grow with a mission of being mindful and having purpose behind everything we do. So yeah, I think I touched on everything on the prickly pear. I have been wanting to, when I started, I felt like it was really difficult to find accounts that would support my business because I didn't have much of a following on social media, and I just needed a couple shout outs here and there from people, and it was very difficult to connect. So I thought, if I ever gain anything in this business, in this social media world, I wanted to use it as an outlet to shout out to other businesses. And I've done just that as I've grown through this business and how I've gained more presence in the social media world. And I wanted to give back. So I started a online nationwide plant subscription where I could send a plant monthly to a subscriber, but I wanted to feature another local small business in the process. So every month I'll highlight a different business, and that business gets to provide their product in each box. So a subscriber from around the nation gets something from someone in Sacramento. And that was and I don't care how many followers this person has. That doesn't even faze me one bit. I just want to know that they're aligned with my vision of making sure that they're mindful of the planet and our community. And that's the most important thing to me when I feature people in that business. So it's been such a cool space to support other female-owned entrepreneurs in our community, and it keeps expanding. So I think I talked on everything. Is there anything I'm missing of my family over there? No. No. What? Oh, my book. Oh, my goodness. Okay, I'm probably at my limit. Okay, cool. So this is a subject that is very near and dear to my heart. I never in a million years thought I'd be talking about it in front of people, but I have always been very comfortable with this topic. I'm all about female empowerment, and I also think that word gets overused often, but I do think it is so important. And really understanding what does female empowerment means, and what it means to each individual. And I feel like self-worth is so key to the success in our own lives and in the environment around us. And understanding, where does our self-worth start and where does it come from? And there's so many different avenues, and I think all of them are very legitimate avenues. But for me personally, I think about it as a more intimate experience, and I got so much validation in my own life from a particular thing, and it's so interesting because this word is very taboo. So the book that I'm writing is about masturbation, and it is a very, very taboo word and conversation to bring up, and it is so important to me because I actually discovered masturbation when I was in kindergarten by total accident. And I remember the recess bell had rang, and Miss Fredrickson was calling all the students in. And I remember swinging down the rope and getting a sensation. And I was just like, oh my goodness. And all I remember is Miss Fredrickson pulling me off that rope. And I had no idea that I was just a little 5-6-year-old kid humping this rope. And she's like, you can't do that. And she rips me off the rope. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing in the world. I'm definitely doing that again. And so I literally would go out of my way to make sure nobody was looking, no teachers were around, and I would go back and try to recreate that sensation. And so I feel like I had such a comfortable experience and a very close relationship with my own body from a very young age. And I didn't really share it with others. It was just something, a validation that I gave myself and that I felt that was good for me. And I never had words or understood why. And I don't think we were, growing up at that time, I wasn't in a space where necessarily culturally, religiously, socially, any of that was acceptable. And I don't even think this word or the talking about it is necessarily acceptable now, but I want to make it normalized, because I think that the fact that I discovered that sensation as a female from such a young age and understanding what my body can give me, it created a sense of self-worth that I can't even really explain, other than the fact that I didn't need intimacy from someone else. I didn't need someone to give me anything other than what I could give myself. And it was just something that I understood. And I remember when 6th grade started and everybody was starting to hook up and everybody was going to like kissing parties and all these things were happening. You know, I just remember thinking, I don't want to kiss anybody. Like, I don't want to do any of that stuff, because I didn't understand what I would receive and what is it that they're going to do for me. And I feel like often girls are labeled as loose and many other terms because they're not even taught from a young age to understand that part of them. And you don't have to say, yes, go home, go masturbate, go do this. But it's just that the conversation's not allowed. If we watch TV shows, we watch movies, we watch fathers walking in on their sons and about to, you know, do something with their private parts, and they're like, oh, that was my favorite toy growing up. But when do you ever hear a mother walking in on her daughter exploring that side of her and getting any kind of validation that that is okay? And that is okay in the privacy of your own room. That is okay to have that conversation and that intimacy with yourself. And if maybe females understood that that was an okay thing to do from a young age and didn't have religion, culture, society telling them, no, that's not what women do, we shouldn't think about that, maybe girls would develop a little bit more worth and self-worth to say, hey, I don't really need that. Hey, I don't actually feel good when this is happening. Actually, I don't understand why I'm doing this for you. And that's what I felt like every time my friends would go to these parties, I'd ask, what did you get from this? When you were like in the room and they didn't even have sex, but they were doing things just to please the male. And this is coming from my female perspective of, you know, my upbringing, but it was like, what did you receive? And it was always like, oh, well, it made him feel really good. And I was like, okay, well, so then it's just a one-sided thing. So that was like where I started as time went by and all these experiences in my life happened. I didn't even really kiss anyone until I was like 19. And I wasn't even sexually active till I was 24. And maybe there was other contributing factors to that, but I really truly think that it was because I discovered something and that validation that I got within myself that I didn't want to give out to someone until I could receive it back in a loving, consensual way. And so that's what the book is about. It's called My Monstera. And if any of you guys know the house plant, it's a Monstera plant. It's a very trendy plant right now. But I believe it's native to Hawaii, and it is just a take. It's a play on words of like, instead of your vagina being this scary, intimidating, monstrous thing, maybe we can think of it as a Monstera plant, as this beautiful, lush, gentle, sensitive space that we need to nourish and be and understand and get to know, instead of the opposite. So the book is called My Monstera. She's mine, not yours. And it is just a really exciting space to be in. I have a writer with me, and I think I have to close up shop right now. But thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm so happy and honored that Creative Mornings asked me to be a speaker here, and I will end it with that.